I was exiled by my entire family after being falsely accused of sleeping with my cousin's wife. My name is Ben, I'm 32, and what I'm about to tell you started about 7 months ago. It was supposed to be a happy day. My cousin Luis was getting married. I was one of his groomsmen. We'd always been close growing up, and I was honestly happy for him. His bride, Julia, was someone I'd known forever. Like, literal backyard pool days in the 90s type of forever. Our families were close, and Julia and I had been friends since we were kids. She was practically like a second sister to me growing up. She had this kind of sunny, big-hearted energy that made everyone feel comfortable. I remember her being the one who always rallied the neighborhood kids for games of tag or Red Rover. Even when we hit our awkward teens and I started getting way more into baseball and she dove headfirst into theater and student council, we still kept in touch. We even ended up going to the same college for a year before I transferred to a bigger program. And now here she was, walking down the aisle, marrying my cousin. The wedding was in a vineyard upstate, small but fancy. I'm talking fairy lights, acoustic covers of 2000s pop songs, and a signature cocktail they named after their dog. I was in the lineup with Luis Brothers and a couple of his childhood friends, all of us in matching charcoal suits and brown leather shoes that hurt like hell by the end of the night. Julia looked incredible, obviously, and Luis looked like the happiest man alive. It should have just been a beautiful memory, but that night ended up being the first crack in what I can only describe as the collapse of everything that came after. At the reception, after a few too many glasses of wine, Julia came up to me while we were both waiting near the dessert table. I just grabbed one of those mini cheesecakes they had laid out, and she gave me this kind of quiet look, not sad exactly, but like something heavy was sitting behind her eyes. "You ever think about how weird it is that we ended up like this?" she asked, almost like she was asking herself, not me. I laughed, because I thought she was joking. I said something like, "Well, yeah, I always figured you'd end up with a guy who did Shakespeare monologues in his sleep." But then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, I mean, us. How we were always kind of orbiting each other. And now I'm married to your cousin." That hit weird. I didn't know what to say. I think I mumbled something dumb like, "Yeah, life's funny." Then she just smiled, this sort of sad smile, and walked off before I could say anything else. I spent the rest of the night trying to shake that conversation. Was she just drunk? Was it wedding nerves? Or had there always been something between us that I just never let myself think about? It sat in the back of my mind like a splinter. And then the text started. It was 2 weeks after the wedding when she messaged me. It started innocently enough. She sent a photo of the groomsmen group shot from the wedding and said, "You looked good in that suit." I thanked her, thinking that was it. But then she messaged again the next day. And the day after that. Then it turned into late night, "You up?" Texts followed by, "Can I talk to you about something?" And always some variation of, "Please don't tell Luis I messaged you." At first, I ignored most of it. I'd respond politely, casually, then back off. I didn't want to be part of whatever she was going through. But she kept pushing. She'd say she missed talking to me. That she wasn't sure if she'd made a mistake. That things with Luis weren't what she expected. That I was the only person who really understood her. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I was in the car and couldn't find the brake. I didn't want to betray Luis. That was the line I kept drawing for myself. But Julia made it really hard to stay on that line. She started bringing up old memories. Like that one summer we went on a church camping trip and stayed up all night talking in front of the fire. Or the time we slow danced at homecoming because neither of us had date. She said she used to think about that night all the time. She even said that if things had been just a little different, we could have ended up together. I started feeling like I was being pulled into something I didn't ask for. And honestly, maybe I was flattered at first. I'd always cared about her, and part of me wondered what would have happened if we had dated when we were younger. But this was wrong. She was married. To my cousin. I tried to tell her that, clearly, multiple times. But Julia didn't stop. Then came the night everything tipped over the edge. It was late, around midnight, and I'd just gotten home from work. I opened my phone and saw a message from her that said, "I'm outside." I looked out my window, and there she was, sitting in her car. I went out, thinking maybe she needed help or something happened between her and Luis. But no. She just showed up. Told me she couldn't stop thinking about me. Told me she needed to know if there was something real between us. I told her she needed to go home. That I wasn't going to be the reason her marriage fell apart. She cried. Said Luis didn't see her. Didn't listen to her. Said I was the only one who ever did. I didn't let her come inside. I stood on the porch with her for 20 minutes until she finally left. And I told myself that was the end of it. But it wasn't. That was 7 months ago. And the fallout? Well, let's just say this is only the beginning. It happened about a month after the wedding. Luis and Julia were hosting a big family gathering at a country club-style venue, kind of a continuation of the celebration for people who hadn't been able to attend the wedding itself. I was invited like everyone else, no sign of trouble. I even spent the first hour shaking hands, sipping watered-down cocktails, and making small talk with aunts I hadn't seen in years. It was loud and bright, with a jazz band in the corner playing Frank Sinatra covers and kids chasing each other between tables. Then out of nowhere, I hear someone yell my name, sharp, angry, not the kind of call you ignore. I turned toward the voice, and there was Luis, storming in through the back entrance of the hall. His eyes were locked on me. I didn't even have time to process what was happening. No warning. No signal. Just rage. He charged straight at me, fists clenched, ignoring the people trying to stop him. His first punch landed square in my cheek, and my head snapped to the side. The second blow hit me in the chest, so hard I staggered back, and nearly fell into a table. Before I could raise a hand to defend myself, he swung again, catching me in the jaw. The pain was instant, sharp and hot. Glasses shattered nearby as people screamed, someone yelling for security. I hit the floor hard, dazed, bleeding, and still in complete shock. Luis was yelling something, but everything was muffled and drowned out by the chaos. I remember seeing Julia pushing through the crowd with her hands over her mouth, her face pale as if she was watching a bomb go off. Someone finally pulled Luis away, and a few other guests helped me up and walked me outside. I ended up being taken to a nearby medical center. The nurse who cleaned me up said I had a split lip, a swollen eye that would bruise for days, and my nose was still bleeding when I got there. The doctor on duty asked me if I wanted to press charges, said he could file a formal report right away. But I couldn't think about that. Not then. All I could think about was why. Why had Luis attacked me like that? He didn't say a word. Not before, not after. Just those 3 hits and a look in his eyes I'd never seen before, betrayal, fury, something broken. I was still sitting in the small, sterile medical center room, the sharp smell of antiseptic lingering in the air, when my phone buzzed. It was barely an hour after the incident at the wedding. I looked down and saw a message from my dad. It was short, cold, and absolutely devastating. All it said was, "The wedding is cancelled. You have until the end of the day to get your things out of our house." That was it. No explanation. No phone call. Just a text that made it feel like someone had knocked the wind out of me all over again. Even though I was 32 and living in my own place, I still had a few things back in my childhood room, old yearbooks, baseball trophies, a couple boxes of books and clothes that I never got around to moving. Nothing major, but still, things that mattered to me. I drove straight to my parents' house, my face still aching, bandaged up, sunglasses barely hiding the bruising. I pulled into the driveway, and even before I could get out of the car, the door opened. My younger brother stepped out with this grim look on his face, like he didn't want to be there but was doing it anyway. He didn't say a word, just walked up to the porch, picked up a big black trash bag that was half-zipped and full of my stuff, and dropped it right at my feet. I stood there for a moment, stunned. I opened my mouth to ask what the hell was going on, but he just turned around and walked back inside, slamming the door behind him. That house, the one I had grown up in, the one I used to think of as a safe place, suddenly felt hostile, cold, like I didn't belong there anymore. And just like that, I was out. No conversation, no defense. No one asked me what had happened. No one gave me a chance to explain. I wasn't just attacked by my cousin. I was exiled by my own family. So after getting kicked out, I thought that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare had peaked. I was bruised, confused, humiliated, but I figured I could keep my head down and at least wait for the truth to come out. I thought things would settle with time. They didn't. Instead, the world around me started to collapse. It wasn't just Luis or my immediate family. It was everyone. People I'd known since grade school, people I'd grown up with, neighbors, co-workers, even casual acquaintances. I could feel them pulling away. My calls started going to voicemail. My messages stayed on read. People who used to wave at me in the grocery store would look through me like I didn't exist. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being erased. Then it got weirder. My favorite coffee shop, the one I'd gone to almost every day for years, suddenly couldn't serve me. I went in one morning, trying to cling to a sliver of normal, and the barista, who I'd chatted with 100 times before, looked at me like I was a stranger. She told me they were out of lattes. Just like that. No explanation, no eye contact, no smile. And the guy in line behind me? He got his latte 30 seconds later. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just social awkwardness or some miscommunication. This was intentional. This was personal. And I had no idea why. It wasn't until days later that I finally found out what had been said about me. I was accused of having a sexual relationship with Julia. Those exact words. Someone had spread that story, maybe her, maybe someone else, but the result was the same. That was the reason behind the fist. That was the reason behind the cold text from my father. That was the reason why people I'd known my whole life were now treating me like something they scraped off their shoe. It was like the entire town had made up its mind before I even knew I was on trial. And the worst part? No one asked me a single question. No one gave me a chance to defend myself. They heard the rumor and they cut me off. Total isolation. So after days of silence, confusion, and total isolation, I did something I wasn't sure I should do, but I had no choice. I called Julia. She picked up. Her voice sounded just as wrecked as mine. I didn't even know what I was expecting. Anger, maybe, or denial, but the moment we started talking, it was clear. She was as blindsided as I was. She had no idea that anyone believed there had been something between us. And when I told her what people were saying, what I'd been accused of, she was stunned. Completely stunned. She kept repeating that it wasn't true, that nothing had ever happened, that she never told anyone there was something between us. That's when it started to click for both of us. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a setup. We didn't meet in person, didn't want to risk making things worse, but we kept messaging each other constantly over the next few days. Comparing notes, going through everything we could remember, looking at who said what, where the rumors might have started, trying to figure out how all of this had spiraled so far out of control. But everywhere we turned, we hit a wall. People didn't want to talk. They avoided questions. They stuck to the story like it had already been written in stone. No one could give us any actual evidence. No screenshots, no recordings, nothing tangible. Just whispers. Just assumptions. Just lies. We weren't being defended. We weren't being asked for our side. Everyone had made up their minds. And somehow, even Julia, the one supposedly at the center of it all, wasn't being listened to either. She tried to tell people it wasn't true, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. So after weeks of being shut out, ignored, accused, and completely left in the dark, Julia and I came to the same conclusion: there was nothing left for us in that town. We had both lost everything. Our reputations, our families, our places in a community we thought we belonged to. People we had trusted for years believed a lie with zero proof, and no matter what we said, no one wanted to hear it. We didn't make the decision lightly. For a while, we kept hoping someone might come around, that maybe someone would finally ask what really happened. But it never came. We were done trying to explain ourselves to people who had already decided we were guilty. So we left. I packed up my apartment and drove 1,200 kilometers away. It was a long, exhausting move, but I didn't care. I just needed to breathe again. I needed to start over somewhere no one knew my name, somewhere I didn't have to walk into a room and feel eyes burning into me. Julia moved to another state entirely. She didn't tell anyone where, and honestly, I didn't ask. It wasn't about secrecy. It was about safety, peace, distance. We didn't have family anymore. Not really. I stopped responding to my parents' messages after the first few came through, filled with passive-aggressive guilt and no sign of accountability. My brother never reached out again. As for friends, the silence had already answered that for me. Julia went through the same thing. She told me once, in one of our messages, that it felt like grieving people who were still alive. The only person I kept in touch with was her. We didn't talk every day. Sometimes we'd go a week or more without saying anything. But she was the only one who understood what it had felt like to have your whole life collapse under a lie. The only one who had been through the exact same hell at the exact same time. And in a strange, quiet way, that connection became the only real thing I had left from that entire chapter of my life. For years after everything that happened, I met someone. Her name is Alice, and she's incredible. Smart, kind, funny in that way where she doesn't even try to be but always hits you with the perfect one-liner. She works as a therapist, of all things, and we met at a friend of a friend's small dinner party that I almost didn't go to. I'm so glad I did. We've been together for 2.5 years now, and being with her has been like learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. She's patient. She listens without judgment. She never once asked me to explain the past until I was ready. And when I did, she just held my hand and said, "That must have been hell. I'm glad you're still here." What's even more surreal is that Alice and Julia, though they've never met in person, ended up becoming friends online. It started when I mentioned Julia one day and Alice asked about her. I explained everything and told her that Julia was really the only person from that chapter of my life I'd stayed connected with. To my surprise, Alice didn't get weird about it at all. She actually asked if it would be okay to talk to her. And now they talk all the time. They have this ongoing text thread where they recommend books to each other. Recently it's been a lot of sci-fi and dystopian stuff, like The Hunger Games and Station 11. They swap theories, debate plot holes, and break down movie adaptations like it's a full-time job. It's strange but also kind of beautiful, two women from completely different points in my life who somehow found common ground on their own. So that's where things are now. I'm still in a new city, building a life that feels like mine again. I have a good job, a partner I love, and a weirdly wholesome connection between my girlfriend and the one person who went through all that hell with me. It happened on a Sunday just like any other. Alice and I had gone out for breakfast, came back with groceries, and were putting things away when I noticed it. A small folded piece of paper, tucked into the crack of the front door. I pulled it out, opened it, and just stood there staring. It said, "We have to talk. I'll be back in the evening." That was it. No name. No explanation. Just those words in jagged handwriting I hadn't seen in years. But somehow, I knew exactly who it was from. I didn't even have to guess. It was Luis. 7 years had passed since the day he'd burst into that wedding reception and hit me without a word. Since I'd been accused, exiled, and abandoned. And now, without warning, he was back. He showed up just after sunset. I opened the door and I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was shorter, thinner in places, and his face looked like it had aged 10 years instead of 7. He wasn't wearing anything fancy. Just jeans, a wrinkled button-down, and this look in his eyes that I couldn't place at first. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was shame. Maybe both. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood there like he wasn't sure I'd even open the door. I didn't invite him in. I didn't move. I just waited. Then he spoke. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. He looked at the ground like he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. I was wrong. I know that now. I found out what really happened. I should have listened. I should have talked to you. I believed something that wasn't true, and I destroyed everything. I didn't respond. Not at first. I just let him talk. He kept going, quietly, almost like he was confessing more to himself than to me. He said he'd spent years trying to forget it all, pretending it didn't eat him alive, but that recently he'd come across something that finally made it all click. He didn't go into detail. He didn't have to. The weight of his words said enough. He looked completely hollowed out by the truth. And then he said it again. "I'm sorry." That was all. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I didn't slam the door or invite him in. I just stood there, caught between who I used to be and who I am now. So here's how the truth finally came out. And yes, it was real. All of it. Luis told me the rest that night. After he left Julia and canceled the wedding, he eventually married someone else. Megan. That name hit me like a punch in the gut. Megan had been one of Julia's closest friends back then. She was part of the bridal party. Always around during the planning, always overly involved, always asking strange questions about me and Julia. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now it all made sense. Luis said they'd been married for a few years, and things between them had always been tense. He didn't go into detail, but apparently they fought a lot. And during one of those fights, Megan lost control. She said something she couldn't take back. She admitted it. She told him the whole thing had been a lie. She was the one who started the rumor. She was the one who planted the idea that Julia and I were having an affair. She fed it to the right people, made sure it spread, twisted small things into something ugly, and kept stoking the fire behind the scenes. And she did it because she wanted Luis for herself. That was her plan from the start, to destroy Julia and Luis' relationship so she could have him. And she got what she wanted. Eventually, she wore him down, played the role of the supportive friend, and once Julia was out of the picture, she moved in. Luis told me that when Megan admitted it, she said it like it was obvious, like it was justified. She told him Julia didn't deserve him, that I was in the way, that she just helped the truth come out. But there was no truth. Just manipulation, jealousy, and destruction. She succeeded. But she did it at the cost of someone else's life. Not literally, but in every other way that matters. She took my reputation, my relationships, my future, and she buried it under a lie. And she walked away with what she wanted. Until the truth came out years too late. So, this happened at Julia's wedding. 7 years after everything fell apart, she found someone who treated her the way she deserved to be treated, and I was there to support her without hesitation. The ceremony was beautiful, peaceful, simple. But that day wasn't just about her getting married. For me, it was something else too. It was the moment I'd been carrying for years. The one I knew had to come eventually. The confrontation. I had quietly invited a few members of the family who had once turned their backs on me. Not all of them, just the ones who mattered most. The ones who never asked for the truth, who just assumed I was guilty, who helped push me out of my own life without a single conversation. They showed up, probably thinking I was extending an olive branch. What they didn't know was that I wasn't there to forgive. When everyone was gathered, I asked them to sit. I didn't yell. I didn't lose control. I just pulled out my phone, called Julia, and put her on speaker. She answered right away. She knew this was the moment. And then she spoke. She told them everything, calmly and clearly. She told them how there had never been anything between us. How she never accused me. How Megan had manipulated the story and planted the lie that destroyed 2 lives. She told them how she was silenced, how she lost her closest relationships because no one wanted to listen. And then she stopped, and I looked at them, all these people who had been my family, and I let the silence hang. Then I told them what I had never been allowed to say before. I told them what it felt like to be judged without evidence, to be cut out of the family without a single question, to be left alone, humiliated, hated, and cast aside while trying to understand why no one even gave me a chance to speak. I told them what it did to me, how I lost everything, how I spent years trying to put myself back together while they lived their lives as if I didn't exist. I watched their faces. Some looked away. A few cried. But none of them spoke. I ended it by saying this. You believed a lie because it was easier than hearing the truth. You chose comfort over loyalty. And now you have to live with that. Then I left. One last time, if you've been here from the beginning, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It means a lot, especially since most people never make it this far. Thank you for being part of this. After the confrontation at Julia's wedding, there was a strange, heavy silence from the family. No excuses. No real explanations. Just a few formal apologies. Stiff, distant, too late to matter. Words that felt more like damage control than remorse. But I stood there, calm and steady, and I told them what I needed to say. I forgive you, I said, looking each one of them in the eye. But I'm not coming back. My life is with people who do not betray me. And that was it. No one tried to argue. No one stopped me. They knew. Julia and I walked away from that day with our heads high and our hands clean. Whatever had tied us to that past, guilt, grief, unanswered questions, it was done. We had finally broken every link to the people and the pain that once defined our lives. We didn't look back. After everything, after the truth came out, after the confrontation, after we cut the final ties, I went home. Back to Alice. Back to peace. Back to the life I had built from the ashes of the one that was taken from me. And I proposed to her. I had been planning it for a while. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet, thoughtful. Just the 2 of us, seated in a small restaurant that overlooked the ocean. The waves were calm, the sky was soft with early evening light, and I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I just looked at her, took out the ring, and asked her to be my family. She said yes. In that moment, I finally understood something I had been chasing for years. Family isn't about blood. It's not about last names, shared childhoods, or genetics. It's about the people who stand with you when everything else falls apart. It's about those who love you, not because they have to, but because they choose to. Alice chose me. Julia stood by me. And that's what family is. And as for the truth? It took 7 years. But it did come out. It always does. Maybe not when you want it to. Maybe not in the way you expect. But eventually the truth wins.